I think the next president needs a brain trust, similar to FDR's brain trust in what he called the War Production Board. Where remember, in World War II, we went from the late 1930s, where we were making about 3,000 airplanes a year, to 1944, where we were making 100,000 planes a year. I mean, that's what we're good at this country. But this was basically coordinated through the government, but it involved private industry as well as the government. We have to figure out how to do the program management and how to make those decisions. And we have to identify the technical and scientific talent and management talent of people who could do it. But I would say these people should be installed in the West Wing of the White House, and they should meet with the president every day, with the Secretary of Energy, and that we should be dealing with this problem as if it was the Second World War. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I think if we wanted to solve the energy problem, if we wanted to make a revolutionary change in that, we would have to operate at that level. And we would also have to integrate work by international partners like China and India, particularly since it may be necessary for the United States, with American taxpayers' dollars, to build pilot plants in India and China that would be producing carbon neutral power, because they're not going to do it. Okay, I said plenty of controversial things. Yes?
It does sound to me as though you're dismissing the important things that are happening in the private sector
No,
right
I'm
now.
not in any way.
The
First
private
of all, I wouldn't
sector,
have my own
private
company
capital, management,
with
private
myself.
capital is driving more money into the renewable sector right now by a multiple than what the federal government spends on renewable.
Okay. You're right. There's a lot of money going in. But if you go to a venture capitalist, and we know this from experience, they want to get 10 times their money back, and they want something that's going to pay off in 3 to 5 years. Because their argument, and it's a valid argument, is that most of the companies that they're going to fund are not going to be successful. So they have to have a big profit and maybe own a big part of the company if they're going to make those investments. A more conventional company, for example, like General Electric, which is the biggest manufacturer of wind turbines, even they could not justify to their stockholders making the longer term investments in the technologies that we need. So we have a situation where on a from now to, let's say, a 5-year time scale, you can get private capital. On a long time scale, like 40 years for controlled thermonuclear fusion, you can get $12 billion, which has been invested by the world, is being invested to build a thermonuclear reactor. But all the stuff that we need is between 5 years and 20 or 30 or 40 years. And that's what we call the valley of death. The valley of death is too far out for conventional venture capitalists to put their money in, and too close in for government agencies. I'm on a roll, I'm almost done. The problem is that I think that the innovative capacity of the private sector is absolutely stupendous. But if you look what people are actually investing in that sector, it's things like ethanol, which I think is just a complete loser, in the long run, because it seems that if it's going to work out, or what's called cellulosic ethanol, that if it's going to work out, it seems as if you're going to make money in the short-term algae, for example, in artificial fuels. It basically drives a kind of investment which is not the highest priority, in my humble opinion. I'm not going to say any more about it. Yes?
Private capital has actually built demonstration scale concentrated solar power facilities. There's one in Nevada, there's another one in Spain, private capital, private companies. So it's not as though nothing is happening in these
I didn't
areas.
say nothing is happening.
And at the same time, it's not as though nothing is happening on carbon sequestration and storage, even though FutureGen went away. All of the pieces of carbon sequestration and storage have in fact been demonstrated. Carbon is captured and re-injected into producing oil wells routinely.
There's a plant called the Dakota Gasification Plant, which is what you're talking about, where they put CO2 into pipelines and they send it to Saskatchewan, to the Weyburn oil fields for secondary oil recovery. I don't know if you know the history of that plant. That plant was originally built under the Carter administration as a synthetic fuel plant. It was built by DOE with government money. It was later sold for 6 cents on the dollar to private companies, and they're saying, oh well, this is a triumph of the market. I never heard this acknowledged by the Bush administration. Thank God for Carter for getting this plant going, because now it can be the poster child for FutureGen. It seems to me that if you look at the technologies that have driven economic growth in the United States and the world since World War II, starting with gas turbines and commercial commercial aviation and large-scale integrated circuits and satellites and satellite telecommunications and nuclear power, whatever its faults, and eventually large-scale integrated circuits becoming applied in computers and cell phones, and the whole internet, which was supported for 20 years by DARPA, and then another 10 years by the National Science Foundation before it was discovered by the Wall Street Journal, who then claimed it as a triumph of market capitalism. I actually think it's a crock. I mean, I actually think that market economics is closer to astrology than it is to a predictive science. I think it's a theological belief that we're going to develop the technology that we need through the workings of the market, because price signals will be thrown up and venture capitalists will make these investments. I know that many people believe it fervently, including my wonderful son who's sitting in the audience, who would make your arguments as well as you. But I don't buy it. I'm sorry, I don't want to spend all the time on it, but it's a major issue and we need to have a national debate about it.